Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone's ignorance is shattered by an unstoppable force of truth? Stay with me until the end of this video to see how a teacher's humiliating judgment was completely overturned in front of an entire school. This story might just change how you view the quiet heroes walking among us every day. Welcome to Honor Echoes, where we bring you powerful stories of veterans whose courage continues to resonate long after their service. If you want to understand the true meaning of honor and sacrifice, hit that subscribe button right now to join our community of supporters who never forget what our military heroes have given for us. It was a crisp autumn morning when 12-year-old Jacob Wilson sat quietly at his desk, his eyes fixed on the clock. Parent Career Day was approaching, and Mrs. Peterson, his homeroom teacher, was collecting the forms indicating which parents would attend to speak about their professions. "Jacob," Mrs. Peterson called out, her voice carrying across the classroom. "Your form isn't completed. Will your father be participating this year?" Jacob shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "No, ma'am. My dad can't make it." Mrs. Peterson's lips tightened into a thin line as she approached his desk. "This is the third school event he's missed this semester. Your science fair, the father-son breakfast, and now this. I was volunteering that day, helping with the school's veteran outreach program. From where I stood organizing pamphlets in the back of the classroom, I could see Jacob's shoulders tense. My dad works a lot," Jacob mumbled, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Peterson sighed loudly, making sure the entire class could hear her disapproval. "Well, education should be a priority. Some parents simply need to try harder to be present in their children's lives." The classroom fell silent. Several students glanced at Jacob, whose face had turned a deep shade of red. He stared down at his desk, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Later that day, I found Jacob alone in the cafeteria, picking at his lunch without eating. I sat down across from him. "Hey there," I said gently. "Tough morning, huh?" Jacob shrugged, still not looking up. "It's fine. I'm used to it." "Used to what?" "People thinking my dad doesn't care." There was a hint of anger in his voice now. "Mrs. Peterson always makes comments. Last parent-teacher conference, she told my mom that children need stability and consistent parental involvement." I leaned forward. "What does your dad do, Jacob?" Jacob hesitated, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed a man in camouflage fatigues, his face partially obscured by shadow and protective gear. "He's away a lot. Mom says we're not supposed to talk about what exactly he does, just that he works for the government." "May?" Jacob traced the outline of his father's face with his finger. "He tries to call when he can, but sometimes we don't hear from him for months." As a veteran myself, I recognized the signs immediately. Jacob's father wasn't absent by choice. He was serving. And based on the limited information and specific gear I glimpsed in the photo, I suspected he wasn't just any soldier. "Jacob, is your mom coming to the Parent Career Day instead?" He shook his head. "She works double shifts at the hospital. She's a nurse. She couldn't get time off." I thought for a moment. "Would you like me to talk to Mrs. Peterson? Maybe explain a little bit?" "No!" Jacob's response was immediate and panicked. "Please don't. Last time someone tried to explain, she just said that lots of parents have demanding jobs but still make time for what's important." The dismissive nature of the comment made my blood boil. But I kept my expression neutral for Jacob's sake. "She said my dad clearly has misplaced priorities," Jacob continued, his voice cracking slightly. "But she doesn't know anything about him. She doesn't know what he sacrifices." I placed my hand on the table, not touching Jacob but offering a gesture of solidarity. "No, she doesn't," I agreed quietly. As the bell rang signaling the end of lunch, Jacob carefully tucked the photograph back into his backpack. "It doesn't matter anyway. Dad's been gone for almost 9 months this time. He won't be back for career day. But as Jacob walked away, an idea began to form in my mind. I couldn't fix the situation entirely, but perhaps I could balance the scales a little. I had contacts from my time in service, people who understood what families like Jacob's endured, and while I couldn't reveal classified information or specific details about Jacob's father, I could perhaps arrange something special for career day. With determination, I pulled out my phone and made a call to an old friend who had connections to various special operations communities. "Hey, Mike, I need a favor. It's for a military kid whose teacher doesn't understand what his family is sacrificing." The following week, tension was building at Lincoln Middle School. Parent Career Day had evolved into a full assembly in the auditorium, with parents from various professions scheduled to give short presentations about their work. The excitement was palpable among most students, but not for Jacob Wilson, who sat alone in the third row, trying to make himself invisible. Mrs. Peterson stood at the podium, microphone in hand, introducing each parent with enthusiasm. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, and even a local news anchor took their turns explaining their professions and answering students' questions. When all the scheduled speakers had finished, Mrs. Peterson returned to the podium. "Well, that concludes our presentations for today. I want to thank all the parents who made the effort to be here." She emphasized the word effort, while her eyes drifted meaningfully toward Jacob. Then she added, "It truly shows dedication when parents prioritize these important moments in their children's education." Jacob sank lower in his seat as several classmates turned to look at him. The shame and embarrassment on his face was evident to everyone. But before Mrs. Peterson could dismiss the assembly, the auditorium doors at the back swung open. The heavy doors of the auditorium creaked as they opened, drawing everyone's attention. 5 men in civilian clothes walked in with a purposeful stride that immediately commanded the room. Though they wore ordinary jeans and button-down shirts, there was nothing ordinary about their presence. They moved with a synchronized precision that seemed almost choreographed, their watchful eyes scanning the room instinctively. Mrs. Peterson faltered mid-sentence, clearly caught off guard by the interruption. "Excuse me, gentlemen, the Career Day presentations have concluded. If you're here for a student, the main office can..." The man leading the group approached the stage. His face was weathered by sun and experience, with a quiet intensity in his eyes that silenced Mrs. Peterson without him saying a word. "Ma'am," he said, respectfully but firmly, "we understand we're late. We had a long journey to get here. With your permission, we'd like to make one final presentation." Mrs. Peterson blinked, momentarily flustered. Well, we didn't have any additional speakers scheduled." "We're not on the schedule," the man acknowledged. "We're here for Jacob Wilson." At the mention of his name, Jacob's head snapped up. Confusion crossed his face as he stared at these strangers who somehow knew his name. The auditorium buzzed with whispers. Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted between confusion and annoyance at having her carefully planned event disrupted. "And who exactly are you?" she asked, her tone making it clear she didn't appreciate the interruption. The man handed her an official-looking document. "We have clearance from your principal and superintendent for this presentation. It's regarding career opportunities in specialized government service." As Mrs. Peterson reviewed the paperwork, her eyes widened slightly. She looked at the men with new uncertainty, then reluctantly stepped aside from the podium. The lead man took her place while the other 4 positioned themselves at strategic points around the stage. Their movement was fluid, economical, nothing wasted, nothing for show. "Good morning," the man began, his voice carrying throughout the auditorium without needing the microphone. "My name is Commander David Miller. My colleagues and I are here to talk about a career path that's not often discussed in settings like this." He paused, scanning the audience until his eyes found Jacob. A subtle nod passed between them. Though Jacob still looked bewildered. "We represent various teams within the United States Naval Special Warfare Command, specifically what many of you might know as the Navy SEALs." The auditorium erupted in excited murmurs. Several boys in the front row sat up straighter, their eyes wide with interest. Even the teachers seemed suddenly more attentive. "Now, I know what some of you might be thinking," Commander Miller continued. "You've seen movies, played video games, maybe read books about what we do. I'm here to tell you that much of what you think you know is, well, Hollywood." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. "The reality is both more mundane and more extraordinary than what you see on screen. Our work involves intense physical and mental training, unparalleled teamwork, and a commitment to values that extend far beyond the battlefield." As Commander Miller spoke, the other men distributed brochures to the students. Not flashy recruitment materials, but thoughtful information about service, sacrifice, and the multiple pathways to serving one's country. "The men and women who serve in special operations make sacrifices that most civilians never see or understand," Miller continued. "And so do their families." His gaze returned to Jacob, whose expression had transformed from confusion to dawning comprehension. "They miss birthdays, holidays, school events. They can't talk about where they are or what they're doing. They live with the knowledge that their next deployment could be their last. And their children." His voice softened slightly. "Their children often face challenges that their peers cannot comprehend." Mrs. Peterson shifted uncomfortably at the edge of the stage. Her earlier confidence noticeably diminished. "There's a young man in this auditorium today whose father serves in one of the most elite units in our armed forces," Commander Miller said. "For security reasons, I cannot tell you his name or his unit. But I can tell you this. In the past 5 years, he has been deployed to 12 countries. He has saved American lives. He has protected our freedoms from threats most of you will never hear about on the news." The room had gone completely silent. Every student, every teacher was transfixed. "And during that time," Miller continued, "he has missed 2 of his son's birthdays, 3 Christmases, countless school events, and more everyday moments than any father should have to sacrifice. Not because he doesn't care about his son's education or development, but precisely because he cares so deeply about his son's future and freedom that he's willing to risk everything to protect it." Tears welled in Jacob's eyes as he realized these men were here because of him, because of his father. Commander Miller's voice grew more passionate. "When this man is on deployment, he carries 2 photographs with him at all times. One is of his wife, the other is of his son. He looks at them before every mission, reminding himself what he's fighting for." Mrs. Peterson's face had drained of color. She was looking at Jacob with new eyes, the realization of her misjudgment beginning to dawn on her. 3 months ago, Miller continued, this man and his unit were conducting a high-risk operation in a location I cannot disclose. They came under heavy fire. 2 of his teammates were severely wounded. Despite being injured himself, he carried one teammate over a mile to safety, returned for the second, and coordinated their evacuation, all while continuing to complete the mission objectives. A few gasps echoed through the auditorium. One of the other SEALs, standing at the side of the stage, nodded solemnly, confirming the account. For his actions, he was awarded a Silver Star. He received this honor in a small ceremony, away from cameras and publicity, just 2 weeks ago. And do you know what he said when presented with this award? Miller paused, making eye contact with various students before continuing. He said, "The only recognition I want is to see my son's face again." The auditorium remained in complete silence as Commander Miller stepped away from the podium and walked toward Jacob. The boy sat frozen, tears streaming down his face as the reality of what was happening washed over him. "Jacob," Commander Miller said gently, "your father couldn't be here today, but he asked us to come in his place, to stand with you and let everyone know who he really is." Jacob stood on shaky legs as the commander placed a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was simple, but carried immense weight. One warrior acknowledging the son of another. Mrs. Peterson had gone completely pale, her hands gripping the edge of the stage so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The realization of her months of casual cruelty and unfounded judgment was written clearly across her face. "Mrs. Peterson," Commander Miller said, turning to face her directly, "I believe you've had some concerns about Jacob's father's commitment to his education." The teacher opened her mouth, but no words came out. The entire school, students and faculty alike, watched her struggle to respond. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice barely audible. I didn't know." "That's precisely the point, ma'am," one of the other SEALs said, stepping forward. "You're not supposed to know. The men and women who serve in classified operations do so without recognition, without public acclaim. Their greatest accomplishments will never make headlines. Their names will never be known to the public they protect." Another of the SEALs approached, this one with a weathered face and eyes that had clearly seen combat. "And their families serve right alongside them, carrying burdens that few can understand." Mrs. Peterson looked at Jacob, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. "Jacob, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions without understanding your situation. I'm deeply sorry." The apology was sincere, but the damage had been done. Months of public embarrassment and shaming couldn't be erased with a single sentence. Commander Miller seemed to recognize this. He turned back to address the entire auditorium. "There's an important lesson here for everyone. The world is full of silent warriors, not just in the military, but in all walks of life. People who do difficult, essential work without recognition. People whose sacrifices remain unseen." He scanned the faces of the students. The parent who works 3 jobs to put food on the table and can't attend every school function. The single mother who serves in the National Guard. The father who drives a truck cross-country to support his family. The emergency room nurse who misses her child's recital because she's saving lives. Each example landed with impact, causing several students to glance down, perhaps thinking of their own families. "Before you judge someone's absence," Miller continued, "consider that they might be absent precisely because they're fighting for something that matters. For their family, for their country, for people they'll never even meet." The 4th SEAL, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward and handed Jacob a package wrapped in simple brown paper. "Your father asked us to give you this," he said quietly. With trembling hands, Jacob unwrapped the package. Inside was a folded American flag in a triangular display case. Attached was a note, which Jacob read silently, fresh tears filling his eyes. "He wanted you to have this flag," the SEAL explained to the audience. "It flew over our forward operating base during his last deployment. He had it with him through every mission." Jacob hugged the case to his chest, his shoulders shaking with emotion. The 5th SEAL, who had been standing at the back of the auditorium, now approached the stage. Unlike the others, he wore a navy blue uniform with distinctive insignia, a full-dress uniform rarely seen outside of official ceremonies. "There's one more thing," Commander Miller said, his voice softening. "Jacob, we have someone else here to see you." The 5th man removed his cover, hat, as he approached, revealing a face that, though weathered by sun and stress, was unmistakably similar to Jacob's own. "Dad." Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. The auditorium collectively gasped as Chief Petty Officer Wilson, still walking with a slight limp from his recent injuries, opened his arms to his son. Jacob didn't hesitate. He rushed down the aisle and threw himself into his father's embrace, sobbing openly now. The hardened special operator held his son tightly, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears as he whispered words only Jacob could hear. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Even the stoic seals seemed moved by the reunion. Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the full weight of her misjudgment evident in her expression. After a long moment, Chief Wilson gently pulled back to look at his son's face. "I'm sorry I couldn't be here for everything, buddy." "You're here now," Jacob said, his voice stronger than it had been moments before. "That's what matters." Chief Wilson, with his arms still around his son's shoulders, addressed the silent auditorium. "I'm not supposed to be here today," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "For security reasons, my team's return stateside wasn't meant to be publicized, but when Commander Miller told me about what was happening with my son..." He paused, regaining his composure. "Well, some battles can't wait." He looked directly at Mrs. Peterson. "Ma'am, I understand how my absences must appear to someone outside our life. I don't blame you for the conclusions you drew. But I hope today helps you see that absence doesn't always mean indifference." Mrs. Peterson nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "To all the students here," Chief Wilson continued, "I want you to know something important. The worth of a parent, of any person, isn't measured by their presence at public events. It's measured by the principles they live by, the sacrifices they're willing to make, and the love that drives their actions, even when that love requires them to be far away." He looked down at Jacob with immense pride. "And I want you all to know that this young man has shown more courage, resilience, and character in handling my deployments than many grown men I've served with. He's the real hero in our family." Jacob beamed through his tears, standing taller beside his father. Commander Miller stepped forward again. "We didn't come here today just to correct a misunderstanding. We came to honor Jacob and all the military children like him, who serve their country just as surely as their parents do. They endure separations, worry, moves from base to base, and often face challenges that their peers never have to confront." One of the other SEALs added, "And we came to remind everyone that heroism takes many forms. Sometimes it's dramatic, like actions on a battlefield. But just as often, it's quiet, like a child being brave while his father is in danger thousands of miles away, or a teacher admitting when she's made a mistake." At this, Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her composure somewhat regained. "I've learned an important lesson today," she said, addressing the entire school. "And I want to thank these men for teaching it. As educators, we're supposed to look beneath the surface, to understand before we judge. Today, I failed to live up to that standard." She turned to Jacob and his father. "Chief Wilson, Jacob, I offer my deepest apology and my profound gratitude for your service, both of you." As I watched Jacob and his father walk out of that auditorium together, surrounded by Navy SEALs who had traveled across the world to stand up for a brother in arms and his son, I realized I had witnessed something extraordinary. A moment when truth shattered misconception, when invisible sacrifice became visible, if only for a moment. The story of Jacob and his father reminds us that heroes don't always wear uniforms or medals where we can see them. Sometimes, heroism is found in the quiet endurance of a child waiting for a parent to come home. Sometimes, it's found in the humility to acknowledge when we've judged unfairly. And sometimes, it's found in a classroom or an auditorium, where perspectives are changed forever by an unexpected encounter with honor, sacrifice, and truth. If this story moved you as much as it moved me, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Honor Echoes right now to hear more stories of extraordinary courage from our veterans and their families. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. and leave a comment below telling us about a time when your perspective was completely changed by learning someone's true story. The echoes of honor are all around us. We just need to listen.